Hello, friends! Welcome to the quilt along. Are you excited? I'm excited. A little jet lagged, but we're going to get it done today. So we're going to wait here for a couple friends waiting for it to go live. I think I've pressed live. The camera's way over there, so we'll see if everything starts working. I do have an iPad here trying to see what's coming up. Hopefully I'm showing up on your screen. If you see me, let me know. I don't know how long the jet lag is, or the jet lag. I'm in airplane mode still, travel mode. So I don't know how long the delay is, the lag is, but welcome. And if you're here and you're joining me for the quilt along, I'm excited to do this with you. Now, so we're not gonna dig right in. We're gonna wait for a few minutes for our friends to join the fun. Let me see. All right, oh good. I think I'm caught up. Yay, fantastic. Hi, oh good, yay. Thank you, Jill. Good morning, Sarah. My mom is here. Hi, Mom. All right, friends. So if you don't know, what we're going to be working on during our quilt along series is the good morning, Kim. I am very well this morning. Thank you for asking. We're still recovering from our travel to Greece. Lily and I had a great time. I'll tell you about it, floss tube, later. But 7-hour time change is no joke, friends. But that's okay. The good news is, to me, it's 5 p.m. So it's perfect. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. 5 o'clock to me still, maybe. I don't know. So we are going to be doing, this is the block. This is the TableRunner we're going to be doing. This is the top, I'm calling it the topsy-turvy block. So what this TableRunner is it's just 5 of these 12-inch blocks. Super simple, super beginner friendly. Now, I say beginner, it's not like super beginner. You do have to adventurous beginner. I love to use the word adventurous beginner because if you're up for a challenge, we can do this and we're going to do it together, and I'm super excited about it. You know, it's a little more than just sewing squares together because you see it does have a half square triangle. So that's what this square that's half triangle and other half triangle, that's called a half square triangle block. Just this little one right here. And you can see that each block actually has 2 of one and then 6 of another. So but don't worry, you're not going to be sewing on the diagonal. And that's the biggest thing with half square triangles. You can use like foundation paper piecing if you're worried about your points, but the reality is I've got a great cheater method to get a half square triangle. But let me not get ahead of myself. What we're going to do today is review the materials that we need for the block, the timeline, or that we need for the runner, the timeline for this quilt along, totally manageable. I mean, I did this whole project from start to finish in a Sunday afternoon. So the fact that I have chopped it up into 4 weekly segments, it's totally manageable. Like, we're going to do step 1 today, and I anticipate this is not going to take an hour. I'm hoping, unless you guys have a lot of questions, I don't know how many are going to join us live or how many are going to watch after the fact, but let's just review some of the administrative things first. Okay, so the first thing we've got the, and I will pop up a picture if I'm allowed to add it after the fact. I don't know. But this is also on my Instagram if you want to go check it out. So it's just the quilt along calendar. So like I said, it's a 4-week, totally doable quilt along. And by Easter Sunday, if you celebrate Easter, or just Sunday dinner, Sunday lunch special dinner for you and your family, your TableRunner will be ready to use that Sunday. So week 1 today, we are going to be cutting our fabrics. I'm going to show you how to do the half square triangle cheater block. The word cheaters is a little misleading, but that's okay. It's the easy half square triangle, easy to do block. That's what we're going to call it. And then we're going to trim and you press your half square triangles. That's all you do this week. And then next week 2, we're going to sew all the blocks together. So that's the 1 week where it's going to take a little bit of time, but it's really just sewing straight lines. And if we get all the cutting and all the trimming done this week, they assemble, they pop together real quick. Week 3, we're going to prepare our backing, which is real simple. It's one straight line. We're going to assemble our quilt sandwich. So if you've never quilted before, don't worry. I'm going to show you how you actually turn a quilt top, a quilt back, and then the batting in the middle, how we sandwich those 3 layers together, how you do it. And then we're going to, let me see that. Yes, we are also going to do the top quilting. So you can't see, I don't want to take it down, but there's top stitching all along this. That's called quilting. I'm going to show you a couple different methods. All can be done on your home sewing machine. So there's no long arm needed, no fancy tools needed. The only thing that we will get into later on is the limitations, if you do have any, with your sewing machine. Whether it has a free motion foot and can put the feed dogs down, or if it doesn't, no worries. I'm going to show you a straight line stitch that you just use what you've got. So either way, you're going to have options. So that's step 3. Step 4, or week 4, if you haven't finished your, you need a pink iron and tools. I know, we're going to go over the tools here in a minute. So if you have week 3 and week 4 to do your quilting, because it takes a little bit of time. If you've never done it before, you definitely want to go slow and take your time, and you're going to learn, but give yourself some grace. And then the last thing is the binding. Now you have two options for binding. I will show you both of them, whether it's a machine binding or a hand sewn binding. Obviously the hand stitching takes a lot longer. For things that are functional, like a table runner, then I'll be honest with you, I wash my table runners in the washing machine because we end up getting guacamole on the table runner. It's just a part of what happens when you have a piece of fabric underneath where you eat food, right? So I choose to do machine stitching, and I will show you the trick that I do. You don't see the top stitching line because I do a stitch in the ditch, and you see the lines on the back, which is on the back side of the table. You never see it. So that's how, but I will show you that during week 4. So, and then I'll also show you hand stitching if you want to learn just binding for quilts. Now, special quilts, I will take the time to hand stitch them. And then you also have the option of a decorative stitch. So that is the timeline, friends. So manageable, so doable. I hope you're excited. Okay, so yes, let's go over it. Now, I tried my hardest. Let me start off by apologizing. I do not have my top-down camera set up. Best of intentions. I really do. I have the tripod, but I could not figure out how to mid-program switchy-do to go from one camera to the other. I'd rather be sewing. Do you wash and iron your fabrics? Great question, Dee. Okay, so prior to starting, so I do not pre-wash. I do not pre-wash or starch or any of that. It just came to me because, now let me tell you the difference. So you have a couple different options. Usually the fabric depends on the quality of the fabric that you're using. All are great. I've used them all. Big box to big money. Either way, I've used them all. So, it just depends on how much sizing, which is a version of starch that is already on the fabrics. So if you wanted to take the time to pre-wash and take away all that sizing, then obviously you need to pre-wash, and you will have to iron because they'll come out of the dryer hot mess. Now, the thing was, you just want to, because it's 100% cotton and we're using the fat quarter. Now, we're not using the entire edge of the fat quarter, but the shrinkage. Sometimes you want to think about that with other patterns. Sometimes they don't give you any shrinkage allowance. Like, you are using every single smidgen of the fabric. So personally, I do not wash my fabrics. I use them straight. I know I'm going to wash them. Like I said, I throw all my quilts and all my table runners are all machine washable and machine dryable. That's how I do it. Unless, I shouldn't say all. If it's an EPP or a hand-stitched quilt, that does not go in the machine because obviously human hands sewed every stitch, and it's a little more delicate. But if for all of my machine sewn quilts, in my machine sewed runners. They all get washing machined. I wash on cool and then I dry on low. And it's one of those things also, I have not washed this one. Next week I will bring and show you what happens. It depends on the batting you choose, but you get this crinkly, soft, the batting kind of just shrinks it up just a smidge and it gives you this fun, warm texture. It gives you fabulous texture. Now, if you don't want the texture, because the shrinkage happens after, pre-wash. If you're cool with it, which I kind of like it, I love the texture that it gives. Afterwards, after those quilting lines are there to hold those in straight, and just that smidgen of a shrink just curls it up and gives you that texture. But I do iron. So I will iron all of my fabrics and they have been ironed. So let's go over the materials next. So materials is also a graphic that I've created also on my Instagram, as well as down below in the description box. I don't know if it loads up during the video, but definitely after the video, I've loaded up the description box with all the things you need to know. So I will link to the calendar, a link to the supply list, and a link to the, I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's okay. This is the cut guide. This is the cut guide. So all these things are going to be linked down below and you can go and grab. Now, of course, if you want to take diligent notes during the video, you don't need to go and get all these downloads. But if you don't, and I talk fast, I've been told that before, then everything is handy dandy. And I will try, this I have not done yet, but I will go and grab, try to get you some links to the tools that we're going to talk about and what I have here on the table. So the first thing you're going to need for quilting is going to be a sewing machine. Like I said, whatever level of sewing machine you have is perfect. The main thing about a sewing machine is that you need to know how to use it. That's the tricky thing, and that's the one thing I can't teach you here, or I can't help you with here on YouTube. It's because every sewing machine is totally different, and understanding the tension and the stitch length and the stitch width and the stitch selector, if it's got one of those machines with 1,000 different pretty stitches, all the things. So understanding your sewing machine and how to turn it on and wind the bobbin and do all the things to make it work, that's key for you. But any level, we're sewing straight lines, except for when we get down to free motion quilting, which quilt topping, which we can still sew straight lines. It's straight lines, it's straight line stitch. Now I use my Juki 2010. I've showed you, I have an unboxing video here on YouTube. I bought this about 18 months ago. I did the unboxing video basically right when I did it. When I bought it, I love it. I've had Berninas, I have my Atlas 1950 vintage machine. I've had the gamut of high to low. They're all stitching straight lines is easy to do. Okay, sewing machine or rotary cutter. Now, I did not bring my other one, but you need to have a good rotary cutter. I use an Alpha, whether you want this one or the ergonomic one. The ergonomic one, I've shown these on my videos before, and I am not good about closing the blade back up. So you want to just be careful depending on you, depending on how you do. I've been quilting for 20 plus years. I'm okay with it. But the safety guard is an up thing that you have to push up and push down. The ergonomic one is a grip. Let me grab it. That's the handy dandy thing about being right here on the live. The ergonomic one closes itself when you don't, when you're not using it. So then there's never any unsafe uses with the blade. So choose whichever one's right for you, or you can get these anywhere. Of course, pink, you're right. Yeah, if you know, then you know. So you need to have a good cutter. The one cutter that I like to use, and then with the cutter, you need a cutting ruler. Now I like to use, this is my go-to. It is on my cutting table island 99% of the time, because it is half width of fabric. So I cut a lot of, when I'm in production of quilts or project keepers or all the things, I use the 6 inches by 24. So that way, when width of fabric is we're going to have a little bit of a torque to it. So if you're new to quilting, then you'll be okay. We're using width of fabric when it comes off the bolt is going to be 42 inches. So it comes folded in half, right? So it's 21 inches full length. And so that's why I love this 24-inch ruler. So if I want to cut a full width of fabric when I need to cut my binding strips, it's one swipe. And so that's the advantage of having a 24-inch. Now, if you have shorter, it's okay. You're just gonna have to either fold or make multiple cuts. So it's something to think about. It doesn't have to be 6 inches wide. So they come also 24 inches, and I have a 3-inch, 3 by 24. That works too. The reason that I like the 6 versus the skinnier one is it kind of gives me a area. It holds the rest of the fabric steady. While you're cutting it, the more surface area that you're pushing down, you can get those gripper things. I've never liked them. There's also little stickers you can put on the back of your rulers. Don't have those. These are all little fancy things that are, some people say nice to have. I don't have them. I find them kind of goofy, but that's okay. You can get a handle because then you can push down. It all depends on if you have any limitations that you need to work through. But I like the 6 because it kind of gives me a better surface area of holding the fabric I'm not cutting more secure. So that way my cut is as good as it can get. All right, so let me some of the questions we've got. So I use, this is a 45. This is a 45, 60. This is what I use 99% of the time is a 45 milliliter. I know it comes in a 60 and I have a 60. I use the 60 for, like if I was going through thicker fabrics, is because the blade is bigger circumference, but the 45, I like the 45 because it comes in fun colors. I'll just be honest with you. The 60 doesn't come in fun colors, but Olfa does like a teal and a pink and a red and fun colors in the 45. So no worries on that. And so let's see. So we've got the cutter and the cutting mat. Now you do need an iron. You don't need a pink cute one, but it always makes it more fun, right? So any kind of iron we will be using later on to press open your seams. The other way that we're going to talk about seams is a little bit further down the road. Safety pins. So you will need, I just keep mine in a handy dandy box. There's nothing fancy. So when we're quilting, when we're making our quilt sandwich, top, batting, back, together sandwich, you have 2 options of how to hold those 3 layers together while you're sewing them under your sewing machine. One would be a temporary adhesive basting spray. Some people feel more comfortable using that, and you certainly can. This is a small enough project where you could put it out on your dining room table if you don't have a cutting island like I do, and you just spray a little bit of adhesive, put it on. It's a temporary adhesive. It does that. It washes out. It's great. I've used it before. Sometimes I use that when I'm making my little bags. I did a little bag-a-palooza last time I showed you that. That's what I used when I was quilting those bags because they're small little 15 by 15s. I wasn't going to bother with the pins. I little spray shot, great. But on these table runners, I like to hold my 3 layers together with safety pins. So we'll talk about those later on. But just a standard safety pin, and that's it. So you'll need those when we're making our quilt sandwich. Straight pins are always handy dandy when you're sewing. Whether you have these flower heads or the bobble heads, it doesn't really matter. Hopefully you've figured out the little nuances of your sewing machine on whether you can run over a straight pin. Now, that is personal. I am not telling you to run over a straight pin in your sewing machine because my mom is on here and she will tell me that do not do that, right? So I am not telling you to do that. But I'm also not telling you that I don't do it. Okay, so you do that with what you want. But we will want good pins because when we're sewing our block, when we're assembling our block together, this is a point. The key, like I said, this is not super beginner. It's adventurous beginner, and so we need to to have these points line up as pointy as we want. We want to pin those points together so we get them right at the top. So that's why pins are really important. The other thing that I've got listed are just like regular notions. Hopefully if you're sewing and you're quilting, you have all these. This is nothing new, but some of the things that this is my little Tula Pick trifecta because everything's funner if it's pink. So I just have tiny little scissors because you're going to be snipping a bunch of threads. A seam ripper. Now this is a surgical grade. This is the surgical blade seam ripper. If you're used to the one that looks kind of like a upside down J, totally works too. Because this is basically an X-Acto knife blade. It will cut your fabric if you don't know what you're doing. But, you know, I seam rip a couple things. Listen, I've been sewing for 20 years. I'm still seam ripping lots of things. So a seam ripper, and then this is a slanted, sorry, I don't, like I said, the camera's way over there. But this is a slanted tweezer. And so I use these when I'm sewing my binding. It's a combination, it kind of just helps me hold the binding so you could use this or a stiletto. Maybe if you're familiar with the stiletto. A stiletto is like a metal pointing chopstick. Now you can't use the chopstick because it's wooden and it's not pointy, but something like that. If you've been sewing, the term stiletto shouldn't be new to you. If you go to any of the stores, you can either get, I just like this one because I can hold it at the same time, but either one will work. And then lastly, we've got my wool pressing mat, which I love because it kind of helps me do two things at once, right? With an iron and my ironing board, super great, except for I'm just getting the pressure and the heat from one side. Now with the wool pressing mat, they kind of work together. This is if you don't have this, you do not need this. It's just something fun. And then of course, underneath you will need your cutting mat. So you need a cutting mat. I have a pink one. It doesn't need to be pink, but it needs to be big enough to work with the sizes that you're going to be cutting. So obviously most of them, the standard size are 24 by 36. If you get a full size mat, you can get a half size mat. Just take into consideration, like I was talking about with the width of fabrics, if you get an 18 by 21 mat, you won't be able to cut a width of fabric piece. So that's just something to consider, but obviously you also have to consider with where are you going to store all this stuff? Because it's a big plastic, sheet of stuff. So if you don't have it, you don't have it. And then, last but not least, are wonder clips. Do you know what a wonder clip is? Oh, snap. My favorite little plastic clippy invention for binding ever. I use them every day when I'm making project keepers, quilting, binding, all the things, holding multiple layers together. Wonder clips are magic. All right, so those are the basic tools. Are there any questions that I've gone over? Any questions of what I have, what I don't have, any other things that you want to know regarding the materials? They're pretty straightforward, but like I said, if you're totally new, you could be like, I have no idea what that is, and I'm happy to help. So we'll wait and see if any questions come in. I don't know, like I said, how long the lag is, or if there is one. But what we're going to do now is I'm going to talk about, like I said, so we're going to dive right in. We've got the calendar and the materials, and we're going to dive right in. And so the first thing that we've got, like I mentioned, is the cutting guide. Now this is something I put together. It's like there's no pattern. I did not write a pattern. The videos are the pattern. But I figured that rather than you having to take notes and remember exactly the measurements and quantity of each one, I did do a simple PDF cutting guide. So it will show you how to maximize the cutting of your fabric. Now, I told you the fabric requirements for this TableRunner are 5 fat quarters. So the 5 fat quarters are because we're making 5 blocks, and in each block we've got 2 coordinating fabrics. We're going to use each fabric twice. So one time the fabric, see this little orangey one, and then the orangey one is right here. Is these? So you'll use that same fabric twice. Hello, friends. Good morning. We have a few other friends joining us. Okay, so you need 5 fat quarters of the focus fabric. The background fabric, you see I use this creamy white. It doesn't have to be on my sample we're doing. Mine's not just white, but you need 3/4 yard of your background fabric. Now, when I was making my sheet, it is exact for 3/4 fabric. So if you're nervous about cutting, you might want to bump that up to a yard just to give yourself a little grace. But like I said, I laid out the directions. It's totally enough fabric, 3/4 of the yard of the background fabric. Binding fabric is a 1/2 yard. That's generous. You don't need that much. You could get away with the 1/4 yard if you're an exact cutter, but with the binding, there was no wiggle room, so I did go ahead and say 1/2 yard. The runner back fabric, so just the back, whatever you're going to put on the back of your quilt or the table runner, you need 1 yard. And then you're also going to need a piece of quilt batting. So as a quilter, I have lots of scraps. I buy my quilt batting in the big old wholesale rolls. And so I have lots of scraps ready for using a table runner. So whatever you have, if you have scraps, great. You can definitely, the great thing about batting is you can sew them together. So I have scraps, like this one's not even actually big enough, but you will need an 18 by 70. I said 80, but it really only needs to be, the table runner ends up being 60 inches because it's 5 blocks times 12, 60. I can still do math. And so you'll need a piece of batting that's bigger than that. Now it's 12 by 60. When we're sandwiching our things together, you always want give yourself some overage with the backing as well as the batting. So I like to have 18 inches wide. It gives me a 3-inch margin on both sides, as a little bit less because we're actually going to be trimming ours. I forgot. So it's a 12-inch block, plus we do a 1-inch trim. So it's about 14. Either way, 18 inches, plenty wide enough. So those are the materials that you're going to need. Now, like I said, selecting your, hi Joan. Yes, everybody needs a pink iron. It's so much more fun. So, what you're going to be doing is we're going to be cutting our fabrics. Now, like I said, this is the cutting guide that you can get online, but we're going to cut them together right here. Now, again, let me apologize. I do not have the top-down camera, so you are going to have to try to view at an angle to see what I'm doing. I will hold it up to show you what I'm doing, but like I said, we're going to get this done, and it's going to take less than an hour. So we haven't even started yet, right? So it's 10:30. I mean, we started, yeah, again. We're here together. It's so fun. But the actual doing it, it's going to take no time. So let me tell you a little bit about the fabrics I chose. Now, this was a Riley Blake floral spring. This was my sample, my prototype. Designed the pattern, designed the block, put it together. It's great, right? So obviously I can't do another spring one. So I went to my menagerie, my Wallow fabric, and I pulled out, this is a Sandy Gervais red, white, and bang. It's a 4th of July collection. So I just went to, I had yards of it, but I went and created 2 fat quarter bundles, one that I'm using and one that's going to be a giveaway for the rest of at the end of this quilt along. So I'm super excited. So these are the 5 fabrics that I'm using. It's a 4th of July red, white, and blue themed table run. I thought it would be super fun. So the one thing you want to do, like I talked about before, is each of your fat quarters you do want to iron. Like I said, I do not pre-wash, but I do, good morning. I do not pre-wash, but I do iron, because that way my cuts, it gives me the best chance of success. Set yourself up for success, friends. So you would definitely want to iron out, because when you get those fat quarters, or even if you're using yardage and you're cutting it down, they have those fold lines, and those fold lines can wreak havoc when you're cutting. So don't skip this step. Some steps you can skip, and I will definitely tell you which ones. But this is one I do not skip. Tongue tied. So what you're going to do is I ironed all of my fat quarters, right? And so that's easy enough. Now, I am comfortable because I know my tools, I know my equipment, I use a good blade. So the key with a rotary cutter is change your blades more often than you think. Same thing with your sewing machine. Change your needles more often than you think, and your tools will reward you for doing that. It's one of those things where if you wait until the cutter's not cutting, you've probably cut way too much fabric already. You want to just, Monday morning in my studio, now I do this, I'm changing it, I'm cleaning my machine, maintenance, I am changing my needle, and I'm changing my cutting blade. I probably changed that a couple times during the week, but using a sharp tool is easy, is good. And definitely, because what I'm going to show you is I'm going to cut through all 5 layers at one time. of the fat quarters. And I can do it easily with your tools. Now, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, no problem. You can cut each fat quarter one at a time. Now, let's go over. The first thing we're going to do, as you will see right here, is we're not using that much of the fat quarter. We really aren't, which is great. So you can actually, if you wanted to use some of your fat quarter for scrappy binding, so fun. You could use the rest of your fat quarter for a scrappy back. You could use options galore. You could probably make 2 of these if you wanted to with 1 fat quarter. You would just need more of the other fabric, but of the fancy fat quarter, you might be able to do both. I didn't do the math, but I'm pretty sure you could. Okay, so for each fat quarter, we're going to be cutting 5 blocks. That's it. That's it. You think all these little tiny little half square triangles? No worries. 5 squares out of each fat quarter. Now, each fat quarter, we're going to cut 3 5 3/4 by 5 3/4 squares. Now, all these measurements are going to be squares. 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. And then we're going to cut 2 3.5 by 3.5. Now, like I said, do not fret, do not scurry to write them down. The printout is right here and it shows you the diagram of 5.5, 5 3/4, and 3.5. And it's really that simple. Now, I don't want to go, I'm going to just show you how I do it, just in case this is your first time cutting something. Of course, I'm right at the middle of the seam, but that's okay. So like I said, I am going to cut through all at the same time. I've been doing it long enough where I can't, but don't do it if it's not comfortable to you. So I will cut off the extra. So I've lined for maximum, I think, yeah, my diagram doesn't show you. For maximum usage of your fabric, you're going to want the 18 inches on this side and the 21 length down below. Okay, because we're going to be cutting 3, almost 6 inches. 6 times 3 is 18. So we might as well maximize that to give us the most extra for later, whether you put them in your scrap, however you organize your scraps. We'll talk about that too. However you organize your scraps, or, you know, it doesn't hurt it to do it the other way, but this way it maximizes your fabric. So I've lined everything up straight along the edge of my ruler or my cutting mat. I'm using my 6x6. I line it up here, line it up there, and I cut. Now, so I've got these little edges, raw edges. So this is something that I always have on my cutting island. It's kind of like what they do in the cooking shows where they have those trash bins, those little silver trash bins or whatever. I have the same kind of thing on my scrap island. Now that way, because I'm just throwing, I've been doing a little bit prepping for today, but this is just my little scrap bin. This isn't scraps. This is the trash salvage. I keep scraps separately. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 3/4, full length, right? So now I have a 5 3/4 strip of each of my fabrics. And then I'm going to turn it the other way. And I'm going to cut 3 5 3/4 3 times. Now this one you need to be a little more careful with the extra you put off, because remember, we're maximizing the length. We've got 18 inches, 5 3/4 times 3. We don't have a lot of wiggle room, but we have enough to cut off just a smidgen of the extra. I use my mat to cut 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 3/4. 1, 2, 3. So let me line up my next set. And then my last set. And that's it. And then I have this little scrap, throw it in my scrap bin, and we're good. So now I'm going to match up. So I've got 3 of these. 3 of these ones. 3 of these ones. And 3 of those. Easy enough, right? Okay. So now I'm going to bring back my fabric, line it back up, and this is where I'm going to cut a 3.5 strip, because I need 2 3.5. 1, 2, 3, and a half. It's one of those things where you measure twice, cut once. I always count twice, cut once. That way I don't oopsie daisy. There's a little wiggle room so you won't mess up too much, but, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to cut 3 1/2, 1, 2, 3 1/2, 1, 2, 3 1/2. All right. And so now I've got 2 3 1/2s of each of my fabrics. Okay, we're chugging right along. Easy enough, right? Okay, so this is how much you have left over of your fat quarters. So like I said, if you wanted to make 2 at the same time of the same exact one for you, one for your sister, one for your mom, one for your aunt, whomever, you totally have enough of this fabric. You just need all the other fabric. Now, so this I won't cut up yet because it's that's a good piece. That measures, it should be 18 by 12. So it's a 12 by 18 piece. It's perfect for little project bags, doodad, things like that. So I won't cut that into my scrap bucket, but I will, like I said, we're going to talk about how do I manage my scraps. Now this little piece, this is not, I'm not going to save it like this. What I do, and let me show you just because it's fun, just because a lot of people ask me, and I should have had this more prepared, but a lot of people ask me like, how do you manage your scraps? As a quilter, as a maker of all the things, I have a lot of scraps. And so my favorite scrap is I cut them into usable squares. And so this is one of those 12 by 12 scrapbook boxes that you can get at any of your big box stores. And one of my favorite size, you could do 2 1/2. I finished 2 1/2. So if it's a finished 2 1/2, like scrappy, this is actually a 2 1/2 block, but it kind of, I cut them into 3 by 3 squares, personal preference, 3 by 3 squares and 5 by 5 squares. Charm packs are all the rage, and a charm pack quilt is easy to find. And so if my scrap is big enough, I'll cut it into a 5 by 5 square. If it's less than that, like for example, these were what? 3 1/2 inch strips. So I will cut those into 3 by 3 inch squares and pop them into my 3 by 3 inch square scrappy bin that I pull from later on. So I won't make you watch me do that, but that's what I will do with that. So what I do, like I said, on my table, I always have my trash bin, and then I make a pile of things that need to be cut into scrap management. Now I used to just have another bucket and throw them in there. And then at the end of the day or at the end of the week, I would have this overflowing bucket of fabrics that needed to be dealt with into the fabric organization world. So that process didn't work for me. So I decided along the way that if I do it as I go, it actually gets done. So that works best for me. I used to pile, and then I end up with bins and bins of fabrics that needed to be cut into usable pieces. It didn't work. Hi friends, so many friends here. Okay, so we're cutting the fabrics. Now, like I mentioned, that was the fat quarters. Easy enough, right? Easy peasy. So I've got my extra. I'm going to put it over here to the side. The next thing we're going to do is cutting my solid fabric. Now, remember I told you for my solid here, this was a creamy snowy white that I used. For this one, I thought it would be so fun to do a white with this tiny little dot. Now, it's a tiny little dot, tiny little red dot. So that is my solid background. Now, as I mentioned, the cutting for this one is super exact. I'm a big, don't waste it if you don't have to. So like I said, this is 3/4 yard. We'll get this done, but we need to follow this exactly how it goes. And we're going to do it together. But if you wanted to give yourself a little bit more wiggle room, go ahead. I hope you have a yard of your background fabric. If not, like I said, 3/4 is totally doable, and we're going to do it together. So I've got my fabric. Now this one I did not pre-iron. Shame on me. I've got my iron here. Let's give it a good press, shall we? So we're going to cut this with the fabric. So this, remember, because the fat quarter came in a piece. A fat quarter is 18 by 21. Just in case you didn't know, the width of fabric, like I told you guys, is 42 inches by 3/4 yards. So that's 27, right? This is a bigger piece. This came off my wall here. Let me move this so I can cut a little bit better with you guys to be able to see. Like I said, because this one's a little tricky, I don't want to leave you in a lurch to how we're gonna cut it. So the cutting grid is right here. So for each of the blocks, now remember, we're gonna be using solid for each block. Now my cutting grid is for 5 blocks. If, for example, if you decide you want your table runner to be 3 blocks, I'm gonna add a graphic. It's not ready yet, but I'm going to add a graphic of what you need for each block, just in case maybe you're making a coffee table and you only want 3 blocks. My cutting guide is for 5 blocks, but if you want to make 3 or you want to make less, I will add a little addendum to it and tell you how many you need for each. Each fat quarter, that's what you need for each block, for each half block, and then the solid background. So for each block, you're going to need 3 of the 5 3/4 and 2 of the 3 1/2, and then you're going to need 3 of the solids 5 3/4 and 4 of the 3 1/2. Okay, so because we're making 5 blocks and we need 3 solids 5 3/4 for each, 5 times 3 is 15. So we need 15 5 3/4. Well, wouldn't you know it, the width of fabric is going to give us 7. Pickles. We're so close, right? So let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and cut the width of fabric first. So we've got our 5 3/4, and I give myself a nice pretty edge. Throw that in that bin. 5 3/4, and then 1 2 3 4 5 3/4. Okay, so now we have our 2 5 3/4 by width of fabric, right? And you can see, because I didn't press this on my big iron, let's press that seam out a little bit. Help ourselves out so we don't end up, now that seam is gone. Okay, great. So I am going to go ahead and leave these folded in half, okay? And stack them on top of each other. Take the time to line them up. Easy enough. So we're only still going through 4 layers of fabric. Totally doable. So I'm going to just cut the edge, the salvage edge, make sure everything's on the edge. 5 3/4. And another 5 3/4. 1 2 3 4 5 3/4. I'm going to do it one more time. And then we have to open it up. 1 2 3 4 5 3/4. Yep, hold on. Math. All right. So far, I did 3. And now I have my end. Remember, I kept it folded, but I get 7. So here's my little extra. So I want to go ahead and press that seam out. Like I said, give myself the best chance of success on cutting a square. So 5 3/4, line it up. And this is just 3 inches. So it just makes the cut. All right, so now I've got 14. So close. I need 15. All right, now I'm gonna go back to my full fabric. And this is where it's gonna get tricky. Not too tricky, but tricky enough. All right, so the next thing we're going to be doing, I'm sorry, like I have no way of showing you this. I need a little pointer and a thing. But the next strips are the 2 3 1/2 strips. But also out of that, I need to get 1 5 3/4 block. So what I'm gonna do first, you ready? Is I'm going to cut, sorry for the beeping trucks, if you can hear that. I'm going to cut, so this is still my yardage, right? With the fabric, my yardage. The next thing I'm going to cut is I'm going to make a 7-inch cut. Okay, you're like, what are you doing? 7 inches. And that's it. One piece of 7-inch with the fabric. At the bottom, before I do anything else, I'm going to cut off the 1 5 3/4 that I need. Right? Yes, that truck is backing up in my neighbor's driveway. So now I have a 5 3/4 by 7. Go ahead and just make this 5 3/4. Got my scrap. Add that to my stack, and now I've got my 15. Okay, good. Now I'm back to my 7-inch by 5 inches shorter than with the fabric. 2.5, 3.5 times 2. Yay! That's it exactly. But you can't cut the 3.5 strip because then you wouldn't have the 5 at the bottom to cut. So that's why you have to do the 7 first, cut off the 5 and do this. Now I've got my 7-inch. And now I'm going to turn this 7-inch into the 3.5s that I need. Exactly. That's just the way to get that one last 5 3/4 block that I needed. So now I've got my 3.5s, stack them up just like I did with the 5 3/4. And so the 3.5s, I need 20 of them. Now this little strip, this little not cheaty, but this little strip that I created is going to give me 18 of them. 1, 2, 3. Hold on. I can't talk and count. So again, we're going to have to do some creative cutting on the next step, but totally doable. Don't fret. All right. And I'm just cutting my 3.5 strips. 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5. Perfect. And then I have a little extra scrap. Go. So now I have 18. So close. I need 20. All right. Back to the board we have. All right. So we're getting close. Now, let's look. The next strip we're going to do is we're going to cut another 3.5. Now, don't worry. While we're here, we're going to go ahead and cut the 3. 1, 2, 3. Cut the 3.5. And then you should, now I had a little extra. This was probably almost a yard. So you wouldn't have this much extra, but you will have plenty enough. So then you're going to have, with the rest of your fabric, you should be able to get 3 1.5 by width of fabric strips. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, this is 120-ish length. We need a little bit more. So we're going to get it out of this. But you're going to need this for the bind. So the reason that this is optional, if you want it to be, I liked to be able to kind of focus out these points. If I had my block butt up right to the edge, then the binding's going to cover that point. Or it might, depending on how precise you are with your point sewing. This way it gives you, it's a little bit wider of a table runner. It's going to end up being about 14 inches wide, 14.5. But this way it gives you, and then your points are on show. So we've got these strips at 1.5. And then from this 3.5-inch strip that we cut, we need to get 2 more 3.5-inch blocks. Easy enough, right? 1, 2, 3.5. So now I had 2 more. Add that to my stack. So now I have 20. And then I'm going to take this width of fabric, a little less than width of fabric now, and I'm going to create 2 more 1.5s. So I'm going to end up cutting that 1/2 inch off, and I have 2 more 1.5s to add to my other 1.5s later. That's it. So that was 3/4 of the yard. You actually will have a smidgen left at the end if my math is correct. So that's how that works. So we've got it all cut up. Now the last thing we're going to cut is your binding. Your binding's real easy. I like to use, now if you've been quilting for a while, you might already know your preferred binding width, whether it's 2.5, 1 3/4, 2 inch. Binding is kind of like a personal preference I've found. I used to do a 2.5 inch binding strip. I now do 2 1/4. And so that's what I'm going to show you. But if you decide that that's not wide enough, depends on why do you want it? But I did 2 1/4 binding strips. And what you're going to need to do is just cut, like you saw me give this just a quick press. This is a width of fabric folded in half twice. And I'm going to just cut 4 2 1/4 strips. And that's my binding. Easy enough. Like I said, the cutting is very simple. All right, so then I have 4 width of fabrics for our binding. All right, so we are chugging right along. So we have cut all the fabrics. Yay us. We did not cut our backing fabric. When we assemble our back, we're going to cut our 1 yard of backing fabric in half. But I didn't figure we needed to do that. Didn't need any special instruction. That's basically just cutting your 36 inches into 1/2 inch pieces. If you want to cut that, go ahead. But otherwise, I'll save that for when we assemble the quilt. So the next thing I'm going to do is show you guys how to do the half square triangle cheater block. Easy peasy, you can do it block. Okay, so it's gonna be like one of those cooking channels where I'm going to pull the magic up from and magically it's all baked, but it's not. Because I can't bring you over to the sewing machine. I am gonna try to figure out how to bring the sewing machine over here for when we're actually sewing and putting it together. But for this purpose, I was able to give you enough information during the stages, so hopefully it's gonna make sense. Okay, so how are we going to turn 2 5 3/4 into 4 half square triangles? Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to take 2 of your 5 3/4, so 1 of your fat quarter and 1 of your solid. So you're going to do this for all of your blocks. So all of your blocks, remember, we have 3 of each of the fat quarters and we have 15 of the solids. So this is what your work is. This is your homework for this week, is you're going to do this with every single one of your fat quarter 5 3/4 blocks. Okay, so you're going to take them right sides together. Right sides together, line them up. Okay, easy enough. Pin it, clip it, whatever you're comfortable, or just go rogue, whatever. If you want, precision matters. So go ahead and give yourself a good pin. Maybe you just need 1 pin in the middle, but that's how you're going to do it. So you're going to take this over to your sewing machine. And what are you going to do? You're going to sew 1/4 inch seam around the whole perimeter of the square. Okay? So with TV magic, here we have one that's done, and I used a darker thread, so hopefully you can see it a little bit better. I usually don't use dark thread, don't worry. I'm using white. I would not use a navy blue thread for a table runner. I did that for video purposes. But you can see that I did a 1/4 inch seam all around the perimeter. And that's it. So you're going to do that with all of your 5 3/4. Color with solid, sandwich them together. Easy enough, right? Hopefully we got along. Okay. No questions yet. Then you bring them over to your table. And we have this one, we've brought it over to the table. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to slice it in half. It's easy enough. You lined it up on your quilting mat corner. This one's real easy because you've got 2 points. You line up the point on the line up top and the line up bottom, and then you slice right down the middle. And you're going to create 2 triangles. One side is your fat quarter and one side is your solid. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to take each one of these and cut in half again. This one's a little trickier because you don't have a center point at the bottom to try to line up with. Obviously the point at the top, you're going to line that up at the top. Now what I have learned, or the magic of math, is point to point, diagonal. This is that whole geometry thing. Not my favorite part of quilting, but I get her done. Is 8 inches long. Okay, point to point is 8 inches long. So you can line up on your cutting mat this point, and you're going to line up with the center at the 4 inch center. So if you're going to use your cutting mat, you line up with the 10 line. You want this point at the 6 and this point at the 14, and you slice down the middle. Easy enough? Any questions? Okay, hopefully not. And then, so we've done that twice. And so we've created 4 half square triangles. Easy enough, right? Now this is where one of my favorite tools comes in. And I don't think I talked about this during the tool segment of the program. So you've got this. Here it is. This is just after I cut it. It's all wonky-do. And it's a 1/4 inch seam, so it's a nice seam. So you have 2 options. What to do with your seam? I press open. I definitely press open on a quilt block that is going to have a 4-point intersection. There's going to be a lot of bulk in the corners. So to minimize the corner bulk, if you had just gone to one side, then you have to kind of like figure out which one's whatever. So I always just go down the middle. I always iron down open. Iron the seams open on a point-to-point block. So you have 2 choices. One is your handy dandy iron, pink or not, and then you iron it. Okay, so that works. It's a lot of time with the iron. But what also works is this fabulous seam roller. Now this, again, I will link this down below. This is just a wooden, like, it's kind of like a cookie roller, rolling pin, but tiny. And it just opens the seams right up. Let me see. Opens the seams right up. I mean, like 2 rolls over it, a little bit of pressure on your mat and you're good. So no getting up and doing the things and going back to the iron and all, because you're going to be doing, I'm not going to do the math, but there's a lot of half square triangles. And so you can do it with the iron. That wasn't hard, but it also is super great with the seam roller. Okay, so now we've got these and this. So we do want the next step, the last step of the week, right? We've done all the quilting. We've done all the cutting. We're going to sew all of our blocks like this, making the half square triangle step 1, step 2, and then we're going to get this into step 3. Now, to go from here to here takes a little trimming. Now, this is where you could cut a corner if you want. I do not, because if you want your points to come together perfectly, spending the extra time to trim to an exact size makes a difference. So when you open this up as is, it's going to be a skosh over 3.5. It's going to be, let me tell you, depending on how you sew and how you cut, and that's the great thing also about trimming, is it gives you a little bit of wiggle room to correct any, I hate to use the word error, but to correct any oopsie daisies during the sewing or cutting process, because you do have a little bit of wiggle. So right now, as is, as cut, it's right at 3 5/8. A little bit of 3 5/8, 3 3/4, depending on how you did it. But what you want to do is you want to trim. See these little tags? Can you see the little points are going to be there? Again, remember bulk. There's going to be a lot of bulk in the corner, so we want to get rid of those anyway to kind of help minimize the corner bulk. So one corner, we can just do that easy peasy. The other one, this is where you want to trim your 3.5, 3 and extra down to a 3.5 inch block. So you're going to put, let's say, are you in? So you're going to line up one corner at the top and the bottom. This is on your cutting mat. Sorry, I don't know how else to do this. And you want to trim this way and this way. That way you still keep your point in the corner. You'll understand when you do it once and you're like, wait, if I turn it this way, then I lose the point out of the corner. So you just want to trim your block. So then I turn the corner this way. You always want to be cutting the same corner. And once you do that, I'm back to a beautiful point, and they're 3.5 inches. And now they're ready for us to sew together next week. That's it. Woohoo! Less than 20 minutes from actual cutting and all the things. The cheater block half square triangles are put together. I think we're good. So remember, this week, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be cutting all your fabrics. You're going to be doing all of these Sewing all these together, slicing in half again, opening them up and trimming them down to 3.5-inch squares. Because then we're going to take those and assemble them later on. So you can see how they go together. See, magic. All right, friends. All right, I think that is all we have. Now, what I'm going to do is if we have any other questions, we'll let you guys ask any questions, but I'm hoping that it's easy and that you guys are excited and that you can do it. If you are doing this, and tag me on Instagram, I would love to see your progress and we sew this together. I will be working on mine so that I'm ready to go next Monday when we're actually going to be putting all the blocks together. Like I said, that's gonna need a sewing machine. So we'll have to figure out how to bring that over here to show it to you guys, but we're gonna get it done. And that's it. Now, if you're watching this after the fact and you have a question, put it in the comments down below. Now, what I'm going to be doing this week, so if you're live here with me during March 13th, week of March 13th, I am going to be monitoring the questions, keeping track of them. If there's a bunch of questions, I will come on with a supplemental Q&A quilt along video to answer the questions, but maybe there won't be. If there are any questions that I didn't answer, I will answer them in that video, or I'll add them to the regular Floss Tube Friday video. But otherwise, the quilt along, we will be back next Monday. So hopefully, yay, Sarah, I'm glad you're excited. So I hope this was a manageable amount of work for this week. It's totally doable. It shouldn't stress you out. I hope you're excited. All right, friends, that is what we've got. And that's it for today's video 1 of the quilt along. So thanks for joining me, friends.